So for tonight's homework, we're going to look at equations that contain fractions. The easiest thing to do when you find an equation that contains fractions is to get rid of the fractions. And how are we going to do that? You're going to find a common denominator, and then you're just going to use the distributive property to multiply the entire equation by the common denominator so that you can clear the fractions. And then you'll be left with the equation that's just terms that are not fractions, and then you can follow the regular rules for solving equations. So we're going to take a look at 3y divided by 7 plus 5 sevenths equals negative 1 seventh. We want to look at the denominator, and lucky for us, we can find the least common denominator, or the LCM. The least common denominator in this case is 7. So we are going to multiply this entire equation by 7, which means we are going to distribute out the 7 to every single term inside the parentheses. So I'm going to be multiplying 7 times 3y over 7 plus 7 times 5 over 7, and then 7 times negative 1 seventh. And this is where finding the LCD will allow you to cancel out, so you're left with terms that don't have any fractions. These two 7s will cancel, and that will leave us with 3y. These 7s will cancel out, and that will leave us with 5. These 7s will cancel out, and that will leave us with negative 1. And now we're left with a two-step equation, like you did in 6th and 7th grade, that we can solve for. So we're going to subtract 6. No, we're not. We are going to subtract 5 from each side. That's going to cancel. I'm going to be left with 3y equals negative 6. Divide each side by 3 to isolate the variable, and I get y equals negative 2. Just makes it a lot easier to get rid of those fractions. You can take negative 2, plug it back in the original equation, and see if it works. Sometimes our common denominator isn't as clear as in example 1, like in example 2 right here. So we have to find the least common denominator, or the least common multiple of 3, 4, 6, and 2. And the least common multiple of those numbers is 12. So we're going to take this equation and multiply every term by 12. So we're going to multiply 12 times 2p over 3, 12 times p over 4, and if you want to make that a 1p, that's fine. It'll help us with simplifying this later, minus 12 times 1/6, and that equals 12 times 7 over 2. So we can't just cancel these out like we did with the last example. So I'm going to multiply the 12 times the numerator and divide by the denominator. So if I do 12 times 2, that's going to give me 24, and there's a p, and then I get 24p over 3. That's going to simplify to 8p. 12 times 1 is 12. There's a p on top. So I get 12p divided by 4. 12 divided by 4 is 3, and just bring the p down. Minus 12 times 1 is 12 divided by 6, and 12 divided by 6 is 2. 12 times 7 is 84. Our denominator is 2, and 84 divided by 2 is 42. Now we can go ahead and combine like terms. 8p plus 3p is 11p, minus 2 equals 42. Add 2 to each side. We get 11p equals 44. divide by 11, and we get p equals 4. And you can do this without getting rid of the fractions, just makes things a lot more complicated. So look for the least common denominator, or the LCM of the denominators, and then just use the distributive property to multiply it out. One other example I want to show you that's not in the notes. Sometimes you'll see fractions in equations written as proportions. So if you remember from 6th grade, a proportion just means that the numerator and denominator in each fraction is proportional. So 1/2 is the same as 2/4. And if I multiply 2 times 2, that's going to give me 4. And if I multiply 1 times 4, that's going to give me 4. And that tells me that these fractions are proportional. So if I have a fraction, like 1/2 again, and then I have a missing numerator, but I know my denominator, I can use that proportionality to solve for x. So if I do 2 times x, which is 2x, and 1 times 10, which is 10, I can use the properties of the proportion to solve for x. Divide by 2, and I know that x equals 5. So what happens if the proportion isn't as pretty as that one? Let's take a look at this example. I have x plus 2 in my numerator, 2 in my denominator, and that is equal to 14/4. So again, the laws of proportions tell me that cross products are equal. So 2 times 14 is the same as 4 times, this word is important, times this quantity. So it's 4 times the quantity x plus 2. And then we can use our properties for solving multi-step equations. Simplify, or get rid of parentheses and simplify. 2 times 14 is 28. 4 times the quantity x plus 4 is 4x plus 8. And then just solve your equation. Subtract 8 from each side, and we get 20 equals 4x. Divide by 4, and we get 5 equals x. Plug it back in. 5 plus 2 is 7. 7/2 is proportional to 14/4. And if we simplified 14/4, that would simplify to 7/2. We're going to spend some time on these in class tomorrow. So now it's your turn. These are the video questions. Again, make sure you record these in your homework notebook, and then go on the Google form, record your answers. Multiple choice question 1. What common denominator would you use to solve the following problem? And number 2, solve for x, which means you have to clear the fraction first.